Hello and welcome to the GrapeSEED Official Podcast. We are up to Unit 6 now in our Take a Step series, where we look at the overall objectives for a specific component and see how the day-to-day instructions in the lesson plans help us achieve those goals. Looking back over our series so far, we have talked about a chant, a song, and several stories. As much as I would love to talk about Sad Sam again, in the spirit of keeping things unique and fresh, we will talk about the action activity here, freeze. As always, we start with general context. In each unit up until now, your students have had action activities. These have all been fun and exciting chances for students to move and burn off some of their energy while still acquiring English. While all different, they have all more or less followed the general pattern of you as the teacher giving commands and students following them with the correct gesture or movement. Here in Unit 6, with the freeze action activity, however, we add a new element, that of a game. You will still be providing commands for students to follow, but with how freeze works traditionally, not stopping when the teacher says freeze can result in students being out and, in essence, losing the game. While seemingly small, this new dynamic can have a big impact in your class. Like with everything in teaching, you need to be in tune with and know the personalities of the students in your class and the class as a whole. In some classes, adding in competition is a positive thing. Students don't want to be out and want to win, so they listen very closely to what the teacher says. This, in turn, helps you build better classroom management overall, as students have a positive incentive to follow what the teacher says, as opposed to simply not wanting to get in trouble if they don't follow. In these kinds of classes, students of course don't want to lose, but if and when they do, they don't take it too hard. In other classes, having competition can be more negative than positive. Students might be very sensitive and take losing or being out very strongly. They might appear to be following the activity, but instead of having fun and enjoying the game with their teacher, they are fearful of making a mistake. Some of this is innately based on the personalities of the students in your class and how they come together to form the overall class dynamic. But you as the teacher have a lot of influence on how these types of activities are received by the class. You can do things like explain the rules of the game clearly in the first few exposures, praise students who are freezing properly, and not drawing too much negative attention to who makes a mistake and is out. That last one is key, especially when it comes to how the rest of the class responds. If you say, "Oh, Bobby is out," and the rest of the class starts to point and laugh at Bobby, then Bobby is not going to enjoy freeze very much going forward and won't want to play. Keeping students focused on the game itself and simply noting who is out while also praising the winner or winners is generally the way to success, no matter the class. Of course, if you have an overly sensitive class where any element of competition does more harm than good, you may need to adjust how the game is played by that group of students. Let's talk goals. Naturally, the goal of GrapeSEED's Freeze isn't simply to play a game with your students. The teacher manual and the quick checks outline our goals for what we want to accomplish. Early exposures. Are students beginning to understand that in this context, the word freeze means stop? Middle exposures. Are students able to follow along when the commands are given at a faster pace? And finally, end exposures. Are students able to follow directions when the commands are given at a faster pace and out of order? Aside from the early exposure example, these are typical for the types of objectives you will see in the teacher manual for many action activities. Let's back up a moment. How do we, as teachers, know if students are understanding the language we are trying to get them to acquire? Asking questions is a big method we use, but what we do in action activities is also another method. If you tell a student to run and they start running, they clearly understand what you have told them to do. The response time before they start running is also a good indication of not only how well they understand, but also if they are thinking in English as opposed to translating in their minds. I would see this a lot in my previous life in junior high schools in Japan. I would say something to students in English, their eyes would roll back in their heads a bit, and then after several seconds, they would respond. In those seconds, they were taking what I said, trying to translate it into Japanese, thinking of the response in Japanese, then translating that into English. This is definitely not ideal for communication and not how we want our GrapeSEED students to be learning. If we tell students to run and they immediately run without that pause, we can be pretty confident that they are thinking in English. Circling back to our quick checks here, why do we care about faster response times and mixing up the order of the commands? For giving commands at a faster pace, we want to provide a greater challenge over time for students. Can they run and then jump and then, oh wait, it's time to freeze? This increased challenge will keep the game fun for students through later exposures. As for mixing up the order, there are always a few students in every class who, whether it's from doing so much RAP at home or just cleverness, will memorize the order of the commands you give over time. If they have the order memorized, then they aren't really thinking during the activity. They'll literally just be going through the motions. Mixing up the order keeps their little minds engaged and focused on you and the commands you are giving.
Goodbye, my friends, goodbye. I'm sad to say goodbye. It was a good day, but now I will say goodbye, my friends, goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.